Live. Webinar is being live streamed. All right. Let's wait and see for YouTube to catch up. I think we're there. I think we're there. I think we're live. Hello, YouTube. Hello, world. Anybody that's joining us today, thank you very much. You are here for the Tailscale Ask an Expert series with myself, Alex.
And me, Lee.
Lee Briggs is feeling a little under the weather today, so we've all got to be very, very nice to Lee and send him some Lemsip to make him feel better.
Yeah, I am feeling a little bit under the weather today. So my all answers today are with a caveat of it may not be completely accurate because my brain isn't functioning like it would normally would. But we'll see how it
Norm,
goes.
because normally of the two of us, you're like the high energy one. So I'm gonna have some.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. This is the only one I haven't looked forward to because I woke up this morning feeling terrible. That's the only reason. But
Yeah.
I did not want to leave you in the lurch, Alex. As much as I know that you could do a full hour of answering questions on your own, I did not want to leave you,
I
in the
didn't I
lurch.
don't want
So
to have
it's
to break out the tap dancing shoes anyway to keep the
exactly,
people
yeah,
entertained. So
yeah.
what is this next hour or so that we've got coming up? Well, you can ask questions in the live stream. We're on both YouTube and also on Zoom. It would probably help if I started the Zoom side, wouldn't it? Let's do that. There we go. No, the Zoom side is now live too. So what is this next hour? It's a Q&A format. You can ask Lee and I pretty much any question you would like about Tailscale. We will curate the questions. So if we can't get to your question in time, sometimes there's just not enough time. We can follow up with you via email if you would like. And yeah, we can talk about Tailscale. We can talk about networking, pretty much anything you can think of in that realm. We'll do our best to talk to you about. So throw some questions in the YouTube live chat. We'd love to see those. If you're on the Zoom side, we ask you use the dedicated Q&A section so that we don't miss those questions coming through in the chat. We've got the ever fantastic producer Kate on the back end, sort of marshalling the questions and kind of keeping the thing flowing along. So I think probably for me, the biggest news out of Tailscale this week is that grants are now GA. Does this mean that ACLs are dead?
We have made the commitment that I think most other software companies would never dare to make, that we are going to continue to support them until the end of time or the heat death of the universe, whichever comes first.
Yeah.
But one of the things that our CEO Avery has kind of made a foundation on is that if we're going to build a platform in which you build a network connectivity, it has to be stable and backwards compatible. So ACLs are going nowhere. They will continue to function and they will continue to work as long as you need them. There are a lot of benefits to moving to grants, though. And one of the things that I would really encourage people to start looking at is, what kind of level of segmentation do you need in your network? Do you want to be able to get application level capabilities in some applications? We actually have a really interesting Grafana proxy that you can find in our open source repo that will actually authenticate you directly to Grafana based on your Tailnet identity. And grants is one of the mechanisms that's the underlying use case there. You've done lots of content, Alex, on TSIDP, which also uses grants as well to kind of determine who you are. So there's a lot of benefits to moving towards grants, but ACLs are going nowhere.
I put a link to the grants GA, the generally available announcement post in the YouTube live chat. But essentially what you can think of a grant, it's kind of a bit like a firewall rule, but for your tailnet. It basically permits who can go where, who can see what can access what. And our old syntax was called access control list, ACLs. But the new syntax, which is going to supersede and become like the standard default moving forward, is called grants. So you can do stuff like, say, the engineering team is only allowed to access development tagged nodes, for example. And then you can use something like Tailscale's just-in-time access to come through grants to say, well, they can access production for the next 30 minutes or something like that, around like a maintenance window or deployment window or something like that. And grants is what's powering all of that kind of smarts behind the scenes. One of my favorite things to do with grants, though, is the new VIA functionality. So you can route specific traffic via a specific subnet router. So, for example, I want to route all of my BBC traffic out through a subnet router in England. That way, I don't need to have specific rules or app connectors or exit nodes or anything like that. I can just whitelist certain domains and they all traverse things correctly. So the VIA stuff's really powerful, and it answers a question that we've had for many years of how do we make a subnet router more secure, of like, I don't want to give everybody on my telnet access to that entire subnet. Well,
Yeah.
now you can lock it down using grants.
There's a great question that's come in related to this in Zoom that I think is a good time to answer it. The question
Let's
is,
go.
are grants implicitly deny all and only granted capabilities are allowed? So by default, if you have no ACLs or grants in your tailnet, you cannot do anything. And so it's deny by default, and we build a whitelist of, sorry, an allow list of capabilities and permissions on like as you add those. One thing that is always worth pointing out is when you create a new tailnet, we add a very permissive ACL to every tailnet so that you don't end up kind of wondering why Tailscale isn't working. And you create a telnet and you can't connect to anything. That's kind of the reason that exists. It would be a pretty poor user experience if you install Tailscale on two devices and then you had to go and figure out why you can't communicate with them. So step one is always remove that permissive ACL. It's like a star ACL from every tailnet that you create. And then from there, you add permissions on who can kind of communicate with what. So hopefully that helps, Dan. Sort of related, Vladimir has come in and asked a question that's kind of similarly related as well. The question is there a way to prevent certain users from using certain exit nodes? I want user to have access to my service ports like 80 or 443, but I want to prevent them from using that computer as an exit node on my tailnet. Alex, you have any ideas around this, or I can jump in and answer as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so advertising the exit node capability, it means that you can use that thing as an exit node, and you can use it to communicate with other, other things on the tailnet. You can use that as a default route for all the other clients on the tailnet. If you add an ACL that allows you to do like port 80 or port 443, it will also allow you to be able to communicate via port 80 and 443. Now, the thing that I think you're asking me here is like if I've added port 80 and 443, can they then use that thing as an exit node? I actually don't know if that's something you can do off the top of your head. Like I wonder if it's something in the IP. Like so if you look at a grant, there's an IP field which will allow you to specify certain protocols. But I think this is actually something I'm going to need to, maybe it's just the illness I'm fighting off today, but I can't think of a way to allow communication with another node and then prevent you from using it as an exit node off the top of my head. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for that right now, unfortunately.
I think there is a way. Is there a group for exit node permission? There's certainly a group for internet permission, like an auto group for internet permission. So you could
Yeah, so that's
deny,
auto group internet, right? Yeah.
yeah,
But I think you're actually right. If you have a very restrictive set of ACL, so you remove the default ACL and you don't add auto group internet, you should only be able to communicate with that other node via port 80 and 443. So I think that's probably right if you haven't added auto group internet. Yeah, I think you've nailed it there, Alex.
yeah, Vladimir. If that's not covering off your question, please let us know. But we're going to jump into some YouTube questions now. The first one came in from Praetor Zin. Who comes up with these usernames? You're just making my life difficult, people. Okay. Is it possible to access reverse proxied service? Is it possible to access reverse proxied services by local DNS when on a tailnet? I haven't been able to make this work, and I need to avoid updating the public DNS as I'm currently using that for Pangolin, which is like a self-hosted Cloudflare tunnels alternative. So what do you mean by local DNS? I am assuming you're not meaning the ts.net entry, the magic DNS entry here. I assume you're meaning that you own your own custom domain name and that you want to use that on your LAN and then also have that be routable from some kind of external place. Would you agree with that?
I think this is a split DNS question, right? So if you have a
Yeah.
public facing domain, which is likely going to be pangolin.mycooldomain.com, and that's going to point to the public IP address of your router, for example, is my guess here. And then internally, you want to be able to resolve that over the Tailscale IP address when you connect it to Tailscale. So this is a split DNS situation, a very common thing in most corporate enterprises, and usually at home. The step one is run a DNS server, right? Like an internal DNS server in your environment. DNS mask is pretty easy to get up and running. Core DNS is pretty easy to get up and running. And then set that resolver to be one of the DNS resolvers in your Tailscale settings. So if you go into the admin console and go into DNS, you can specify a DNS server which you've set up. I recognize that's probably not like the easy mode that you want to be able to do, but that's the only real way of being able to do it, because what you want to do is have the split horizon situation where if you're on one network, it resolves a certain thing, and when you're on another network, it resolves another thing. I generally have kind of moved away from split DNS because it's super confusing and it can be really like tricky to configure correctly. So what I do is I just add all my Tailscale IPs to my public DNS now and just use Tailscale to connect to them. That's the easy mode way of doing that.
Yeah. So you can get as fancy as you like with split DNS. And I've put a link to a very old video of mine, which is probably a couple of years old now, talking about magic DNS and how you can split DNS between different sites and what have you. Where it does become useful is if you have a bunch of local entries across a bunch of different sites, and you want each of those sites to maintain functionality, even if Tailscale's not involved. You run a local DNS server in each network, so it could be a Pi-hole. Lee mentioned a couple of others, Core DNS. There's a bunch. AdGuard Home is another one that blocks ads for you as well. And you can set that in your Tailscale DNS settings to run as your upstream DNS server for the entire tailnet. And because it's Tailscale and everything's a flat network, it doesn't matter where the devices are. They can all route their DNS queries through that kind of central DNS server. So that's another option as well. But really, there's no one right way to skin this particular cat. It's genuinely like DNS is one of those things that it's complicated, and when it goes wrong, we all love to have, we all love the Jeff Geerling's T-shirt of it's always DNS, right? But it's true because it's at the core of everything we do. So the
I mean,
easiest.
the
Go
easiest
ahead.
thing to do is add a host file entry. That would be the easiest thing to do. Like if you really want to do easy mode here, is add a host file entry, and don't have to deal with DNS at all. But that's the very I've been around long enough to remember when we used to send host file entries to each other back in the early
Yeah.
90s. So yeah, let's not go back to those days.
You're speaking to the guy that when he did his computer science masters, sent source code around on Facebook Messenger in a zip file to his teammates because Git
Yeah,
was
that's
too
a bit.
complicated, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember the pre-Git days very vaguely. So, yeah,
We've
those
all
were
committed crimes against humanity at some point
SVN,
in the name of tech.
SVN.
Yeah.
Man, I do not miss SVN at all.
Mercurial is another one.
Mercury, and my previous company was a big user of Mercurial for the sole reason, like, well, Facebook uses it, and I'm like, okay, but they're the only ones. Like,
Yeah. So
everybody
what? They
else
also
is
use
using it.
ButterFS, which has got a massive right hole anyway.
And then there's all
Uh,
this the Perforce club with all the gaming companies using Perforce. Good question again. While we're on still kind of associated with grants, do grants include a time window for expiration or an ability to specify on/off times? Not by default, but there is a posture mechanism with just-in-time posture that can do this. And so that will allow you to add a new field to a grant that is source posture. And the source posture is a metadata attribute on the client. And once you add it, you can have something like remove that over a certain amount of time, which is really, really useful. And it's good for things like temporary access to production or temporary access to the Kubernetes operator and stuff like that. It's really, really useful. So highly recommend looking into that.
Now I've just put a link in the chat to our just-in-time access video that came out 3 weeks ago now, kind of giving some more details on that particular
It's
topic.
always so serendipitous. You do a video and then there's a question about it 2 weeks later. It's great.
Yeah, well, I haven't done one on grants yet, but that is coming. And these questions, by the way, inform the content that I make. So thank you for asking the questions I didn't know needed answering before I'd even thought of them.
I
I love
like
you
it.
guys. So another question on grants. Where are they enforced is the question.
I'm going to try and where are grants enforced? They're
Yeah.
enforced on the actual. So basically, when you every Tailscale client gets a net map, right? And it's like a big map of what's actually happening on the network. And it's enforced on the local client when that net map is kind of propagated out to all the nodes in the Tailscale network. So one thing that we always say is if like in the very unlikely events that we have a control plane outage or there's like a problem with the Tailscale control plane, everything will continue to work, but you can't make modifications to things like ACLs because you can't propagate those things out to the client. So essentially, when you set a grant or when you set an ACL in the editor, what happens is that gets propagated out to all of the different clients. When we do demos for customers on the solutions engineering team, one of my favorite things to do is like modify their grant and then show how quickly that applies. It's usually less than the amount of time it takes me to change my window. So usually sub millisecond it happens, which is a very, very impressive feat of engineering especially when you're in some of the large networks. But the client locally itself basically says, you are trying to connect to this thing that I know about, but over a port that I won't let you, so I'm not going to let you do that. And so that's kind of how they're enforced.
Yeah, all client side. So every single rule set that gets created in Tailscale, yes, it's coordinated by the central server, but all of the processing happens client side. So, for example, with DNS, your phone is running a local DNS server as part of the Tailscale package on the
Yeah.
phone itself. And the rule set gets pushed down from the central server every time there's a change. And the same is true of grants, of everything else. So yeah, it's a pretty performant way to do it. And the nice upshot of that is, if Tailscale goes down for any reason, central server is not reachable by the particular client, the rest of the internet is for whatever reason, like maybe you just can't reach tailscale.com for that few seconds. It doesn't matter because everything happens locally. So that means the performance is a lot better, the resolution is better, all that kind of stuff too. All right, so a couple of questions regarding connections and trust and unsolicited stuff. So there's one about funnel here, first of all. Are there any ways to secure the funnel connections and reduce scanning, or do you recommend any compatible systems instead?
I mean, I think the short answer is no. As soon as you funnel something, you're putting it out on the public internet and putting it at the behest of all of the scary things in the public internet. The glib answer is yes, don't use funnel and just use Tailscale to do the communication. But if you want to expose something over the public internet, funnel is basically giving you, exposing those things to all the big scary internet things. And so you are going to be port scanned. You are going to have random people trying to connect to you. That just is kind of the contract that we have with the internet as a large right now.
If you don't want it public, don't make it public, right?
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
that's
If you don't want to
generally the
be, yeah.
rule.
I think if you really wanted to, you could look at different ways of exposing it to the public internet and doing it that way, and then add a firewall in front of it. But like that's really outside of like a web application firewall. Sorry, like that's really outside the scope of funnel, right? For us, like funnel is just your ability to, provide access
Right.
inside your tailnet through our infrastructure, basically. So I think the short answer there is no, unfortunately. Other ways of doing this, yeah, attach a public IP to it and put a web application firewall in front of it, whether that's with your cloud provider or at home or anything along those lines.
I put a link to a project called CrowdSec in the YouTube chat right now, which I've seen a lot of chatter about in the self-hosted community for people putting on in front of public URLs to do things like blocking specific geo regions and stuff like that. Essentially, it's a crowdsourced server detection and protection against malicious IP engine, whatever that means in plain English. So I would have a look at that because I think it's kind of doing what you want. There's no affiliation with Tailscale. Like I've never even used the software, but I've read about it many times, and I believe it will do some of what you're asking. But the reality is, if you don't want it on the public internet, don't put it on the public internet because
Yeah,
vulnerabilities are a thing. And even if you have a login page, like somebody somewhere's got an exploit for it, I can almost guarantee that. So
indeed.
um, next question. In fact, there's two kind of very similar ones here. Is how can I block unsolicited outbound connections from hosts I don't trust, and how can I block certain Tailscale IPs from making unsolicited calls to my other Tailscale hosts, but still allow me to connect to them?
Again, I think this comes back to what we talked about earlier. It's around like building your ACL. Like every single question that is related to this, I will almost guarantee you've probably got the default ACL configured in, or you've got that default permissive ACL in there. So step one is let's remove that line, right? Like let's get rid of the the star allow anything line. And then nobody will be able to communicate with anyone in your tailnet. And then you're supposed to build your connectivity on top of that, right? And so if you don't want people to be able to like make unsolicited outbound connections, you don't give them all the group internet. And if you don't want people to be able to communicate with your application on port 443 or HTTPS, you don't allow that route. I think what there's been a lot of questions around grants and ACLs here. I'm like almost thinking to ourselves, we might need to write a blog post or a piece of content which is like it's day one and you've got Tailscale, what should you do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, because one of the things that's really great about Tailscale is it just works. But then when you want to do these more advanced things, because it's just worked, you haven't really understood the underlying way of how it all connects together. So I do think that will be really useful. Like, the first 24 hours with Tailscale, remove the default ACL, start building up your traffic and going from there.
I wonder, could we approach Mr. Beast to do some? Let's not go down that route.
Let's not do it. Yeah.
First
Let's not
24
do it.
hours with Tailscale.
I just the eyes on those videos just freak me out, the Mr.
Yeah,
Beast eyes, Anyway,
true.
personal opinions aside. There's a really interesting question that I've seen in our little list that I think I'll be clear, we don't have a straight answer to this, but it's an interesting question. Do paid customers, i.e. Personal Plus, Starter, Premium, etc., get any kind of priority on DERP servers? If not, are there any plans to introduce this? The short answer for that right now is no. We have a specific queuing mechanism which we apply to all DERP servers, which basically gives a fair usage across all clients, assuming you are not being, you're not BitTorrenting over it or sending, large amounts of traffic. I think there is certainly internal interest around this, right? Like, and we've got to be very clear. Our product roadmap and demand are very, very intrinsically linked. So if you are interested in paying for DERP servers that are for your tailnet that are kind of like outside of the community DERP servers, we would like to hear about it. We want to hear about these things, whether it's in GitHub issues, whether it's sales contacts, support tickets, like all the ways that you can communicate with us. It's something that we have generally stayed away from for the simple reason that I personally have a belief that there should be no internet fast lane and it should be relatively fair. But at the same time, if you're paying us at Tailscale, $100,000 a year, you probably want your traffic prioritized over Lee's BitTorrent traffic, right? So I think this is something that we want to hear more about from you folks. If you are interested in, exploring this, you can always run your own DERP servers. It's not a straightforward thing to do. We generally don't recommend it. But if you want dedicated traffic, running your own DERP servers is an answer to that as well. And there are lots of community things. I maintain a community DERP server package that you can run. But generally, the answer is no. And so, more feedback in the comments would be super useful.
Always, always useful. Speaking of comments and feedback, in the last couple of weeks, we had a security bulletin published around a shared domains issue. And I want to address that very quickly in the live stream today. There is a question here saying one of my co-workers was able to see somebody else's nodes in Tailscale. I put a link to the security bulletin in the live chat on YouTube. But the short answer is, if you're affected by this in any way, please reach out to our support teams immediately, and they will do everything they can to prioritize your ticket and get you taken care of, and make sure that the shared domains issue is taken care of. It's something that our engineering teams are taking incredibly seriously. Let me tell you, internally, there's been some huge discussions, senior leadership all the way up to Avery involved in this one. So take a read of the security bulletin to find out more.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I always want to add here is, we all obviously read the comments for better or worse. Never read the comments, but we all read the comments for better or worse. And I think one of the things that was very kind of clear is like, how did you let this happen for so long, right? And I think the answer that I would have to that is everybody has worked under a prioritization system at work, and I can bet you imagine There are things that you have identified in your day-to-day role or your software engineering job or your environment that you're like, man, we should really take care of that. And I think this is one of those things that was a wake-up call for us. There's no kind of excuses really. I don't think anyone's trying to make excuses. We always were going to reprioritize this, and we always were going to make sure that we got this fixed. But priorities change and priorities shift, and I think there's certainly a deep level of like humility around this internally for us at the moment. So, we hear you loud and clear. We're not a perfect organization. This was a mistake, and we will rectify it and fix it. And we have some really exciting changes around our identity model coming. I think in our last Ask an Expert, when I did a bunch of demos, everybody saw a little sneak peek about some of the things that are coming around the ability to switch tailnets and all that kind of stuff, and have tailnets embedded in tailnets, which is going to be exciting. But all of that is underway, and we are going to address it in that scope of work, basically.
Yeah. So again, reach out to our support teams if you're affected in any way by this one. And yeah, we're sorry about that. Okay, question for you, Lee. Can I self-host a DERP server?
Yes. So the code for a DERP server is just in our open source repo. It's in the Tailscale repo under command DERPer. It's a Go binary. We don't publish packages for it, so you need to build it. And then you need to run it on a node that has both IPv4 and IPv6 addresses attached directly to it. I run a DERP server. I run a couple of DERP servers in Linode, one in London and one in Seattle, because they are kind of geographically close to the places that I want to connect to. If you want to run production level DERP servers, you have to connect them together and create a mesh key and do a whole bunch of other stuff. But for a single small organization, a DERP server can be run pretty easily. The reason we don't generally publish any documentation on how to do this is because it's a much more complicated task than like installing and setting up Tailscale, and it requires, if you run into problems, we just don't have the capacity to be able to help you. So, you can do go install for the DERP server. I maintain an RPM package that I periodically publish. I know there's plenty of people out there that package it up into a Docker container, which you have to run with host network. Yeah, you can totally run your own DERP server. You just need to make sure it has IPv4 and IPv6 connectivity. And so it has to have a public IP. It can't be behind a NAT. It can't be behind a firewall. It must be publicly available. And the other thing that you can do finally on this is if you run Tailscale alongside your DERP server, you can set a flag on the run of the DERP server that will only allow your tailnet to connect to it. And so people can't randomly add your DERP server to their netmap or to their ACL, which is something that I do as well. So yes, you can totally run your own DERP server. I have offered to help people do this on a kind of production, on a production level, but we generally don't recommend it, basically.
Jeff Goldblum time. The scientists were too preoccupied with whether they could. They didn't stop
Hmm.
to ask themselves whether they should. Is
They
running a
did.
DERP server as a regular user a good idea?
I don't think so. I think most of the problems that you run into that you need a DERP server for can be solved by architecting things so you get direct connections, right? Making sure that you are using EasyNAT on both sides of the equation, or making sure that you are putting one side as a no NAT is usually, pretty straightforward. I would generally steer away from it in most circumstances.
It's just one more thing to break, right?
It's just another thing that can go wrong. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the client side, the question came in around Docker. Is it better to use the official Docker container beside an app? And I'm assuming that means in like Docker Compose when you're running applications together. Or would you or would you embed Tailscale into a container with mods, for example? And I assume that means like running your application and Tailscale inside the same container. I know you've done a lot on this, Alex, so I would love you to answer it.
Yeah, so this actually speaks to, well, back in the dark ages of my Docker history, I was one of the founding members of linuxserver.io. And we came up with this concept of a Docker mod, which was this idea of being able to install plugins effectively or customize the init sequence of a container to do custom stuff. I didn't write that bit, by the way. There were some very clever people that wrote that bit, not me. But essentially, you're limited, as far as I'm aware. Linux server.io containers are the only ones that support Docker mods, as they are called. They do work really well. Like you can install, if you have a Linux server container and you want to install a Docker mod in there of Tailscale, it works. In fact, some of my production infrastructure that I do here at Tailscale for some of the developer relations, event demos and stuff like that, I utilize that stuff. I just use the Linux server Nginx image, throw Tailscale in the Docker mod section of that image, and it just works. But for everything else, which is like 99% of the rest of the internet that doesn't have mod support, a sidecar container is the way to go. And it's certainly the officially supported and sanctioned way to go, even for Linux server images too. So a sidecar Docker image only uses about 20, maybe 25 megabytes of memory to run alongside your existing application. And literally all it's doing is proxying traffic to and from your tailnet using, there's some clever Linux kernel namespace merging going on behind the scenes. But so far as you're concerned as a user, your application, whatever it is now on Tailscale just through the virtue of having one little sidecar container.
Very thorough, wonderful answer, Alex. Thank you. You want to throw a question at me next? Like we've got a couple that I've highlighted.
Sure, yeah. I'll ask you any roadmap for using custom SSO providers, also known as custom SCIM.
So I want to make sure I differentiate between these two things, right? SSO, we use the OIDC protocol for logging into Tailscale. We consistently get questions in our support queue for like, why can't I log in with email and password? So, to address that while we're at it, we don't want to store your password locally because we want the identity providers to store it because they're way better at it than we could ever hope to be. So every Tailscale network must have an OIDC backend. However, you can bring your own custom OIDC backend. I think you've mentioned a couple of times, Alex, things like Keycloak, which are kind of supported, and you have to host your own OIDC provider.
Yeah, Pocket ID
I
is the one
believe
I
this
did a
question is
video on
asking,
recently.
is it going to be possible to support SCIM with those custom OIDC providers? The answer to that right now is it's not on the roadmap for two reasons. One, while SCIM is a allegedly well-defined protocol, every single provider SCIM implementation has its own nuances and differences. We found that as we tried to make this generic. And so what we end up doing is playing whack-a-mole with everybody's SCIM implementation. We implemented SCIM support for Microsoft Entra ID, and we were under the belief that that would work out of the box with Okta, and we found that that didn't work. So right now, there is no potential like roadmap item for this, but again, we're driven by customer demand. So if you are wanting to use Tailscale and you want to kind of this is a blocker for you, and you feel that like it's like significant enough in terms of our revenue dollars that we could, manipulate our roadmap, or manipulate is the wrong word, but influence our roadmap. We want to hear from you, right? And we recognize that, we'd love to be able to support this. If there was a protocol that was ubiquitous and worked across all identity providers and didn't require us to do custom code for every single thing, we would almost certainly do this, right? But as it stands, that has not been our experience with the SCIM protocol.
Now, another question came in asking about our user community that was recently formed. Recently hired a new community manager. Her name's Natasha. She's fantastic. She sits alongside me on the DevRel team. And I'll put a link in the chat here to our new Insiders program. So if you are a Tailscale super fan and you'd like to get more involved with the Tailscale community, we have a program just for you. Please fill in the form, apply, and Natasha will get back to you at some point talking about this program.
Yes, and Natasha is also from the British expat club that is forming at Tailscale. I think we have one of the largest British expat communities in any software engineering organization. I love it.
Why is that? Like,
I don't know. I don't know. I think part of it is because we hire in Canada, and there's a big migrationary population from the UK to Canada. But you, me, and there's at least three other British people living in the USA at Tailscale as well, which is,
I wonder. My
we're just
theory
gonna.
is is that we all miss iPlayer so much that we are VPN adjacent
Yes,
for most of our
yeah,
lives.
maybe, yeah. I just want to have a community of people who I can tell peep show jokes to and have them understand it. That's really what I'm looking for. I will say, just on the community side, we are, Natasha and I met last week about kind of building a community gathering space outside of Reddit. So watch the space. I'm really excited about that. One of my favorite things to do is kind of go back through the YouTube comments here and see how like engaged everybody is. And I think we've recognized that having a gathering place for people would be extremely useful. It would also take a lot of work off me and Alex because it would mean we wouldn't have to constantly answer questions and stuff. Because I think there's so many knowledgeable people in our community who can help and answer questions. So we're hard at work at that. I watch the space. It's in process.
Yeah. Oh, here's a really interesting question that came through about DERP servers in particular. Does Tailscale have any rough stats on how much traffic runs through a DERP on a daily basis?
I don't. I have actually previously asked if we can publish this, and we have made an explicit decision not to. But I will say it is. I don't know how much one. No, I'm going to say no. I don't want to get in trouble. We're on a live stream. It's a lot of traffic, right? Like, let's put it this way. It's a lot of traffic, right? Like, I have made the joke to our DERP server team that we're basically a CDN that has a client attached to it, right? Because we're
Yeah.
pushing outrageous amounts of traffic. And I will also point out, we don't bill you for this, right? Like, I think I constantly see these comments after the Series C and in Reddit and in Hacker News being like, it's a matter of time before Tailscale sells out. And I'm like, we have been not charging you for bandwidth for the past 5 years, and you're worried we're going to sell out, right? Like, we could have charged you for bandwidth a long time ago, and we haven't done that. So we are here to make your life better. We are here to make your life easier to connect to things, and we push a lot of traffic on your behalf through our DERP servers as a result of that. We spend hundreds of like I'm just gonna give a number there. We spend a lot of money on bandwidth here at Tailscale. Let's put it that way. So don't want to give too much information away right now, but generally it's a lot of traffic. It's a substantial amount.
We can't blame you for thinking these things either. I mean, particularly if you're in the self-hosted ecosystem like I am, just look at what Plex are up to lately. Like just enshittifying left, right, and center. I mean, Cory Doctorow sort of coined this term a couple of years ago to describe what happens when a company has to monetize every single feature in order to stay solvent. Avery, our CEO, has gone on record, sometimes on YouTube even, as well as our blog, stating Tailscale's business model is give it away for free, get people excited about the product, and then they'll bring it to work. And that's where we
Yeah.
make our money. So charging for a DERP server is probably not on that list, if I'm honest.
Well, I think charging for public DERP service is certainly not on that list, but if we have enough interest from people who want to run, a dedicated fast lane DERP server for just them, I think we'd definitely be open to exploring that for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Do you happen to know much about the Android client? Someone's asking
I know
about
I have
node
not used
signing.
Android in 15 years, so no. I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna defer to you on that one, I think.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Node signing on Android. I'm afraid no answer on that one, I'm afraid. So
There's a nice easy question here. When our App Connect is coming out of beta, any minute now.
any day now.
We had the internal document this like last month that was kind of like talking about making app connectors GA. It was approved. It's happening any minute now. Wait for the blog post. It will be any. I actually wondered if it was going to come out today. So yes, very, very soon is the answer to that question.
Got so many questions about DERP server. I think this is one of those situations where we've spent a long time talking about DERP servers. So people ask questions about DERP servers, and we're just going to spend
Yeah,
the entire time talking about DERP servers, apparently.
I mean that's fine. It's a very
Um,
serendipitous.
can we give back to the community by crowd hosting a DERP server?
Yes, but we will not add it to netmaps by default, right? So if you want to run a DERP server and you want it to be a public DERP server, totally do that. But Tailscale networks will not use it by default. We have the default DERP map, which we add to when we host. We are not going to add random DERP servers that other people host to that for security reasons, as you can probably imagine, right? Like we need to be able to trust the traffic and we need to be able to trust what's going in between that infrastructure. But if you want to host a DERP server and you want to specify its IP addresses and then publicly communicate that so people can optionally add it, that is totally fine. It's very easy for people to add those things manually. So yes, again, you are outside of the confines of Tailscale support at that point. Here be dragons, your mileage may vary. But if you want to host a DERP server and not make it locked down to your infrastructure, you can totally do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, coloring outside the lines, I think, is a good way to put that one.
Indeed.
It's a very nice idea, though. I mean, it's one of those things that if I don't know, you want the DERP service to be absolutely 100% vetted and trusted,
Yes.
because even though all the traffic traversing them is encrypted end to end over the WireGuard tunnels that Tailscale operates on, you don't really want to have any kind of incidents related to third-party DERP servers. So our standard DERP map will remain uh, special,
Tailscale only.
blessed,
Tailscale only. Yeah. Yeah.
blessed. Yeah. All right, let's see what else we've got in the questions. They are coming thick and fast today. We've got about 15 minutes left now, so
Yeah.
we may not get to all of them, but thank you for asking anyway. All right.
Good question here. I'd love to go for if you don't mind, Alex.
Hmm.
With the node limit on the account, if you hit that node limit, will future nodes fail to create? We use AWS Spargate to fin up Tailscale routers. When we deploy, the new ones come up faster than the old ones are removed. So I think this is kind of collating two different questions together. So I'm going to read between the lines and XY it and kind of address them both. So the first of all is that we have it's actually like a hard limit of 3,000 nodes on a tailnet, especially for personal plans. We can raise that limit, but it is something that we have to do. And so you would need to contact us if you want more than 3,000 nodes. Part of the reason for that is, obviously the more nodes you add to a tailnet, the more traffic there is in terms of the net map we send out. So, from a size perspective, we have tailnets that are many, many thousands of nodes. It's just something that we want to be able to communicate with you around that. I will also say if you're at 3,000 nodes, you're almost certainly violating our terms of service. You probably shouldn't be doing that because you need to pay for those devices. Everyone gets 100 devices by default, and then you add 20 devices per user license that you add. But if you're running 3,000 nodes and you've only got one user, you are almost certainly violating our terms of service, and we need to talk to you. So that's step one. The second thing that I think this is asking is when you spin up an AWS Fargate like subnet router, for example, you're probably making it ephemeral and you are adding a new one, and then the other one is hanging around for a little bit. The reason for that is that we run a job to clear up ephemeral nodes on like a schedule. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but they don't vanish immediately. If you want it to vanish immediately in your shutdown step within Fargate or within Docker, you need to run tailscale logout, and that will immediately remove the client from the list, and you won't run into any kind of limits. I would love to hear a little bit more about this particular use case because I'm very interested in kind of what we're calling the machine-to-machine communication stuff. And so if you're running 3,000 nodes or you want to run 3,000 nodes in your Tailscale network, I personally would like to hear from you. I'm not going to give my email. It's pretty easy to find me. Or if you want to email sales@tailscale.com, we would love to talk to you. But I think that's what you were getting at when it talks about like the old one is removed slower than the new one is added. So yeah.
The chat's going bonkers asking for OpenSense tutorials. It's okay, people. Calm down. There's already plenty of content about OpenSense. There are 2 videos about OpenSense already, as well as a blog post and a huge long support article with those videos embedded in it. So if that OpenSense seam of content doesn't meet your needs for any reason, please reach out to me, alexk@tailscale.com, and I'll make another one. How about that for a promise?
Loud noises.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any chance of Tailscale being launched for Samsung or Sony smart TVs or make a good exit nose on most of us who have our home network? Alex, you want to try and
I
cover
don't
that
know
one?
specifically about smart TV integrations because I know that the Tizen OS that Samsung uses is pretty locked down.
Yeah.
What I will say, It's the Apple TV is it's right there. It's pretty cheap, and it
Raspberry
doesn't.
Pis, $30, right?
You're
Like,
not
yeah,
you're not beholden to a specific manufacturer's rules or anything. I suppose you are beholden to Apple, but the Apple TV will sit there and sip half a watt when it's not in use, and still function in deep sleep mode as a full subnet router. So
it's crazy.
for me, it's impossible to beat that really as a just a set it and forget it remote exit node subnet router
Yeah,
situation.
agreed. And just to kind of like round out that particular thing, Tailscale's written in Go. It will compile to any CPU architecture that Go supports, generally. I think April Fool's eponymous Brad managed to compile it for some archaic CPU architecture that I had not heard of in years. And so we can feasibly support Samsung TV and Sony TVs, but the app store for those ecosystems is extremely prohibitive. We do require the ability to specify a network interface in order to be an exit node, so you can't run it in user space mode. And as a result, we just wouldn't get through the App Store approval process, even if we wanted to. So it's not really, lobby Samsung and lobby Sony to let us run on PlayStations, and we're all about it. But ultimately, they have a closed ecosystem, and there's not really much we can do about that.
It looks like from one of the comments in the chat here that Benjamin tried to do Tailscale sideload it on his Sony TV. I'm assuming it was an Android TV, but Sony somehow blocks the traffic even though DNS worked. So I just refer to my previous comment that the Apple TV is probably the easiest way to go. Or
Yeah.
the NVIDIA Shield is also a pretty sweet option as well. All right. So the follow-up to the OpenSense discussion saying that the OpenSense video is out of date because Tailscale's now in the OpenSense GUI. Technically, you are correct, which is the best kind of correct, let's be fair. But also, it's a community implementation. I forget the name of the chap that did it. I think he's from your neck of the woods in England, Lee. But his name escapes me. Anyway, it's a community implementation of Tailscale in the UI of OpenSense. So the official methods still remain unchanged. So the video is also technically up to date, if that makes sense. Technically correct. We're both technically correct. How about that?
Indeed. Yeah, always technically. Should we have our weekly conversation around direct connections? I feel like we haven't done it yet, and there's a question
Yeah,
related to it.
yeah, because
Um,
you have a really great tool to help people diagnose stuff about that,
yes.
which I was using just this morning because I love
I'm
that
glad
thing.
to hear it. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get that in the client, man. Like, I'm going to get it in the client, I think. And to be
Well, what
clear,
is it?
it will go into the client, but my software development skills are not meeting our bar of excellence right now. So it's easier for me to write a random tool that I can put on my own GitHub rather than have to be ripped to shreds by talented software engineers. But the question is, why is Tailscale so aggressive with using DERP servers? Sometimes when I'm on a mailbox network, it uses DERP servers, but using a simple WireGuard tunnel just works without any relay servers. Well, the reason for that is, as always, it depends on the type of connectivity that your Tailscale client has. If you have a standard WireGuard tunnel that has a public address, then sure, you can connect to that, but Tailscale will also work behind NAT. And that's kind of one of its unique properties. So if you get the Tailscale node that is behind, that's on the same place as your WireGuard server onto a public address, so it has no NAT behind it, you'll also get direct connections. It's all a configuration problem rather than like a Tailscale problem. As Alex already mentioned, I wrote a tool which will diagnose the current connection that you have that can run on laptops. It won't run on phones yet. Maybe I'll try and do that. And if you run it on your Tailscale client, it's called Stunner. Alex, also you have a link to it that you can share in the chat. And Kate, maybe can our trusty Kate in the back end can help us. But if you run that, it will tell you what will get direct connections to this particular client, and you want to get that client into no NAT as much as you possibly can. That means opening ports. It means giving it a public IP address. It means like making sure that you don't have to traverse some sort of firewall in order to do that, and you will get direct connections. I do still feel like, despite all the content that we have put out on this, that it just isn't landing. And I wonder, Alex, we've been talking about doing some content together. I wonder if we should do a specific YouTube video on this. Because I did an hour-long webinar about it last year, but an hour is a long time, and you do a much better job of condensing information into short, concise snippets. So maybe we should do something for this.
You know, I earlier on recorded a 53-minute long video about how to install image, a self-hosted image. 13 minutes of that was actually the final runtime. So
Yeah,
I only do a good job because of editing. Like it's a very different beast to do it live. I tell you what.
it's a it's a skill that I have absolutely zero ability at. So I will happily work with you on your excellent editing skills for sure.
Yeah. Malik asks, what was your reaction when you saw PewDiePie using Tailscale in his latest video?
I didn't see this. I want to see
Nor
this.
did I.
Well,
Because
my
I watched the one where he switched to Linux, which was pretty cool, where he sort of rised his desktop for a bit. That was kind of fun seeing such a prominent person using, was it Arch or who was using Hyperland on top of Mint, or I can't remember. It
Well, you just
was good though.
does that mean it's the year of the Linux desktop, Alex? That's my real question. Is it
No,
finally here? If these prominent YouTubers are switching to Linux, are we at the year of the Linux desktop?
the year of the Linux desktop. Well, actually, okay, this is a bit of a tangent for the Tailscale expert hour, but why not? Um, for me, the Steam Deck did more than anything to advance the Linux desktop in the last 10 years. Um, if Proton could support all of the silly anti-cheat stuff that the big guys like EA like to put, I bought F124 last year to try and play that on my Steam Deck, and it turned out I can't run F1 2024 on my Steam Deck because of some stupid anti-cheat thing that only runs on Windows. I'm
My
not even
favorite
playing online. Who
My
cares?
my guilty pleasure game is Red Dead Redemption 2. I just like to go
Oh,
hunting and
so
like
good on the Steam
riding
Deck
around on a
though.
horse. Not only will it only work on a Windows machine, it will not work if you're disconnected from the internet. So if I get on a plane with my Asus ROG Ally, I have to connect to the game, then get on the plane, and I just don't understand it. But any minute now, we're going to have the year of the Linux desktop. But yes, I totally agree with you that it's very frustrating. Let's try and squeeze in one more question.
Let's do that.
Nice easy one. Is there a published roadmap for upcoming features? The answer is no. We have an internal roadmap. That those priorities change on a regular basis, and so we generally don't publish them publicly. If you want to become a Tailscale customer, we're happy to share that roadmap with you so you can influence it. But no, we're not going to publish a public roadmap. Sorry. Another Docker one for you, Alex. When using the Docker sidecar, can we forward arbitrary TCP and UDP packets? This is a personal use case where my daughter's Minecraft server is in Docker, and I'm using a sidecar now for HTTPS.
All right, this is a bit of a yak shaving exercise here because I believe that Minecraft uses quick UDP underneath, which I'm going to link I found this GitHub issue, which might help you. It might just confuse you further, like it did me. Anyway, the short version is Minecraft won't work in this fashion over Tailscale Serve or Tailscale Funnel. You should be able to route packets if the people are on your tailnet, if they're members of your tailnet, that should just work like anything else. But if you're trying to serve it through the reverse proxy of Funnel, it doesn't work at this time. Link in the GitHub issue, full details in there too, along with a response from Brad, who's one of our senior engineers.
And if you don't want to use funnel, I think you just have to expose the port, right? I think that's probably one of the missing pieces. When you do the Docker run for the Minecraft server, you have to expose the ports. And like Minecraft's server has like 6 or 7 of them, if I remember. Like it's not just one. There's like a whole bunch of them that it uses. And so
Yeah.
you need to expose those ports. And it should work over local Tailscale because it's all layer 3, basically.
You would expose those on the sidecar container, not the
Yes.
application container itself, just to further confuse the matter.
Yes. Are there any plans for direct support on Mycrotic non Docker method? I think we've kind of covered architecture questions pretty comprehensively, but Tailscale will run on any CPU architecture. The reason that we don't support Mycrotic is because Mycrotic has not enabled the ability to install Tailscale. It's an operating system limitation rather than anything that Tailscale is doing wrong. So they allow you to run Docker containers, which is why you can run Tailscale on Docker containers, but they probably don't want you butchering their operating system with random packages because it would create a support burden for them. That's my guess. I don't know for sure. But that's the reason why we don't currently support that at the moment.
So today I learned you can run containers on MikroTik devices.
Yeah.
That's cool, isn't it?
I had loads of microtic stuff back in like the late 2009, 2010, and then Unify came out and just changed the game.
Yeah.
And I just love their equipment. So like I haven't used that stuff for a long time, but yeah, I don't see it. I can see why they let you run Docker containers because it's all kind of like ring fenced to some extent from the actual operating system, right? But yeah.
Interesting.
Uh,
Interesting. I can see there's a container here to run Home Assistant directly on my firewall. What could go wrong with
oh,
that?
what could go wrong?
Yeah.
Last question, I think. Any Tailscale flavors have integrated BGP to allow active-active and HA next hops? Sort of. We do support communicating with Bird. I'm just going to try and find the doc for this. I usually have this stored, but we do support. There is a method where you can run with Bird, which will actually advertise the subnet router that's currently active in an active passive mode, and it will actually fail over for you as well. This is a very much like you're on your own sort of thing, but we do support Bird. I can't find the doc for it right now, but if I do, I'll post it in the YouTube comments after. But yes, we support the Bird routing daemon or whatever it's called nowadays.
So a little bit more about Tailscale and how folks can get in touch with you and your team, Lee, at Tailscale.
Yes, so I run the solutions engineering team, which is consistently growing. We've got another person adding next week, which is very exciting. And I saw a few comments on Reddit this week around like the sustainability of our business model. Well, our sales engineering team has doubled in size this last year. So either I'm really bad at my job or our sales requirements are growing. So if you want to get in touch with us, the support team is always available as well. We work very closely with the support team. They are wonderful and they're excellent at their jobs. If you want to contact sales directly, we have a sales contact form, which will get you in touch with sales. If you have talked to a salesperson before, you're probably like, well, I don't really want to talk to sales, but we have a team of sales engineers who are designed to help you be successful. And my experience with our sales team has been that they just want to help you get to solutions as quickly as possible. And they're not going to, bother you in general terms and hit you up with emails and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to talk to us, the sales contact form, hopefully our trusty backend Kate can share that in all of the relative places. And then if you want to talk to our solutions engineering team, I'm not going to share the solutions engineering team email because it got absolutely hammered the last time I did this with random questions and we had to direct them all to support. But if you want to get in touch with us, we're going to have a new community space very, very soon where I will be hanging out there and you'll be able to talk to us directly. So I'm looking forward to that as an option.
Yeah, well, I'll be there too. When it does or does not possibly or possibly does not launch at some indeterminate time in the future, possibly, maybe, definitely not soon. How
Yes.
about that?
As always, this has
Okay.
been absolutely wonderful, Alex. I felt like garbage at the start of it, and I feel slightly better now. I'm going to go with the
Oh,
adrenaline.
good. Yeah.
All of the British people who heard me say they were garbage there, I'm really sorry. I meant rubbish.
Garbage.
I meant rubbish. But it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for like letting me join you on these amazing webinars, and we will see you all next month.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.